Yes, we are back here on YouTube TV after a long layoff, and we're back in time to give you the finale of the Talking 10 tradition of game-by-game season predictions. Last but not least, your Wisconsin Badgers. UW enters the season as one of the favorites to make the college football playoff. But in order to get there, the Badgers will have to navigate a much tougher schedule than they did in 2017. Speaking of that, here's how the schedule breaks down. So before we go to the 2018 schedule game by game, let's break it down into our famed easy peasy, ain't gonna happen, and flip a coin categories. Let's just go ahead and put Illinois, Minnesota, New Mexico, Nebraska, Purdue, Rutgers, and Western Kentucky into the easy peasy category. The ain't gonna happen games, there are none for this Badgers team. And that means we're down to the flip a coin games, which are the ones that I could see going either way. In that category for UW are games with BYU, Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, and Penn State. How do I see those games actually going down? It's time to finally reveal how the 2018 Wisconsin Badgers season goes game by game. The Badgers, they welcome in Western Kentucky first, and had Jeff Brom been at the helm of the Hilltoppers, this would have been much more interesting. Instead, Mike Sanford is in charge, and he's still trying to get a new run-based offensive culture installed. Doing so against Wisconsin is no easy task, and UW wins this one in a rout. Up next are the New Mexico Lobos out of the Mountain West. Bob Davie had this program on the rise, and then a pair of investigations this offseason had him suspended for a month, and he missed almost all of spring ball. The Lobos have slid backwards in the past few seasons under Davie too, and this season there is no triple option offense in place. With a youth movement everywhere in a new offensive system, the Badgers defense has a field day. UW starts 2-0, just as expected. BYU is up in week 3, and that could be more interesting than a lot of people are thinking. After much thought, Wisconsin gets victory number 3, but look for the Cougars to find a way to hang around a bit longer than the pundits expect. Nothing says Big Ten season is here like a trip to Kinnick to face bitter rival Iowa for the Heartland Trophy. And that's exactly what Wisconsin faces, and it's hard to not see the secondary, which had a bobble last weekend against BYU, not learning from that experience. Nate Stanley is a good QB, but the run game is surprisingly going downhill in Iowa City. Look for UW to make the Hawkeyes one-dimensional and control the line of scrimmage all day long. Yes, it's 4-0 and 1-0 in the B1G. Wisconsin gets a week off at the end of September, and with a lot of young players making contributions, it's a perfect time to shore things up, as the schedule only gets more crazy after that break. That's because Nebraska and their new head coach Scott Frost are coming to town next. It frankly hasn't mattered whom the Huskers' head man is though. UW has had the Huskers' number since they joined the Big Ten, and I expect that to be the case once again. But I would caution that the defense may give up more points than usual, as Stanley Morgan Jr. against the corners is a scary matchup. No rest for the West Division favorites though, because after a 5-0 start to the season, it's time for the biggest contest to date. A trip to Ann Arbor and a date with the Michigan Wolverines. It's likely that this is considered the Badgers' biggest test, and just like the last 2 games between these two teams, it could be a defensive slugfest. So how do I see this game between teams that feel like they're mirror images of each other going? For me, it comes down to the line of scrimmage, and I trust the Badgers' O-line just a bit more than Michigan's. Jonathan Taylor has another big game, just like last season. Make it 6-0 and 3-0 to open Big Ten play. After back-to-back big-name programs, UW returns to Camp Randall for homecoming against Illinois on October 20th. This Illini team likely to be improved with a veteran QB, albeit a journeyman in A.J. Bush, but nowhere near UW's level overall. It's a blowout and a 4-game win streak in B1G action. What scares most Badger fans? It isn't Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, or Michigan State on the schedule. It's usually seeing a trip to Ryan Field in Evanston on that schedule. That happens in 2018, and the scene of shocking play, crazy upsets, well, it sees a Wildcats team that could be much better in play than their record suggests at this point in the season. That is to UW's advantage, and I believe that Andrew Van Ginkel has a really fun day chasing down Clayton Thorson. Wisconsin gets victory number 7 and improves to 5-0 in conference play. Most importantly, the win puts a ton of pressure on everyone else in the West Division, and we aren't even into November yet. After surviving the house of horrors that could be Ryan Field for Wisconsin, it's a trip back home to face Rutgers to open up November. A true freshman QB against Jim Leonard's defense? Jonathan Taylor against the Scarlet Knights defense? Easy. The Badgers win another blowout and are establishing themselves as a true national championship contender at this point. It may have been easy against Rutgers, but a trip to Penn State? Not so easy. UW goes into Happy Valley next, and this could be the make-or-break game on the schedule for both teams. PSU likely needs this win to keep pace or control its own destiny in the East Division, while the outside world will see a 9-0 Badgers team needing this to solidify their CFP bona fides. Ultimately, playing on the road against a loaded PSU team catches up to the Badgers, and it's a narrow loss to the host Nittany Lions. The streak is over, and the Badgers are now 8-1 and 6-1 in Big Ten play. And then there's this tricky follow-up game up next as UW travels to Purdue on November 17th. While I respect the cultural change and the maximizing of talent that Jeff Brom has done at Purdue, it's hard not to see this as a nice way to take out some aggression after that loss to Penn State. Oh, and if the Boilermakers are still going to QB by this point, it may be a really easy win for the Badgers. That means we've come to the end of the regular season, and the trophy that never leaves Camp Randall except for that bus trip to and from Minneapolis, yes, it's on the line. We're talking Paul Bunyan's axe, folks. UW's win streak sits at 14 games in the most played rivalry in college football. PJ Fleck is still building his program, and while I respect the Gophers' defense, I just don't see how the offense has what it takes to win here. So I'm picking the Badgers to chop down a goalpost or two, make it 15 straight over Minnesota. It's also an 11-1 end to the regular season and a trip to the Big Ten championship game once again. That's how I see the 2018 season shaking out for Kristen Company. How do you see the season going? Leave a comment below, or better yet, follow our coverage at Talking B1G and Talking Badgers on Twitter, and search for us on Facebook. I'm Andrew Coppens, publisher of Talking 10, and we'll see you when the games are for real in just a few days. Until then, keep on living that B1G life.